Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Just 2 years back, I was here in the month of January making a video about the awful military incompetence of Ruin the Johnson's The Last Jedi. Now I am back to do the same to this film, Jar Jar Abrams' The Rise of Skywalker. A few points, and then we shall dive into the sea of problems and begin our expedition to the unsightly depths. Firstly, I shall not be criticising the individual heroics and amazing feats which the main characters perform. I shall clarify what I mean by this. If a character successfully shoots 3 TIE fighters with one blast, I will not critique the possibility of such a feat. Why? Because the character who did this is actually the protagonist, Rey Sue. I mean Rey Palpatine. But why is it important that I don't criticise Rey Palpatine and the actions she performed? Number 1. Main characters in genres such as space opera and fantasy are supposed to be incredible and are supposed to perform great feats, which invoke admiration in the audience. Number 2. If I were to criticise these things, I wouldn't be doing a military analysis as much as I would be doing a character critique. And I do not want the topic of this video to be derailed. I want to keep the focus on the military elements and not on the characters themselves. However, I will critique the actions of the main characters if they relate to tactics and/or strategy. So to continue with Rey as our example, if after shooting 3 TIE fighters in a row with one shot, she decided that she could take on the entire First Order fleet by herself, I would criticise such a decision. Because it is a dumb decision. One person cannot take on an entire military force by himself, no matter how exceptional he may be. It would be a foolish tactical decision and would be worthy of criticism. Moving on, if any of you are new to my videos and are wondering why I bother with these kinds of essays, I can direct you to my video, Thanks for 10,000 subscriptions, open brackets, also including an essay on villainous errors, close brackets, for a thorough explanation. Alright, let us delve in. There is only one major battle in the film, but before we reach it, we must discuss some other problems which are smaller in nature, and I shall try my best to describe these in order. The film begins sometime after the events of The Last Jedi, perhaps a year or two. Darth Kylo is the supreme leader of the First Order, and he is hunting for a way to get to Emperor Do-It, who has broadcast his existence to the entire galaxy, apparently. Let's talk about Emperor Do-It here. We learn in the first 5 minutes of the film that Do-It created the First Order. We also learn that he has been building an army and navy for years so he can crush his enemies and retake the galaxy. This final navy and army is called the Final Order. Very clever, JJ. This raises a question. Why did he announce his existence to the entire galaxy? He says he wanted Darth Kylo to find him, but there was no reason to announce to the entire galaxy that he was alive. Why not just tell Darth Kylo? Imagine you were the Emperor years ago, but you almost died and you lost your empire, and that you have spent decades building an army and space fleet to reconquer the galaxy. Would you want the rest of the militaries, nations, and armed groups in the galaxy to know that you are coming? Wouldn't you want to strike fast, hard, and unexpectedly? Rely on shock and awe to make your enemies submit to your might? My impression from Star Wars films is that nobody really liked the Empire, so you can bet your bottom pound sterling that if people thought the Emperor was coming back, they would make preparations. Even if the news were enough to scare every military power in the galaxy to bend the knee and submit, would the resistance led by Princess Poppins surrender? Would she be scared enough to surrender? Of course not. The resistance at least would be taking measures against the reappearance of Palpatine. Except they actually don't, but we shall discuss that error later. To conclude, Emperor Do-It's decision to announce his existence to the galaxy was stupid. He could have just messaged Darth Kylo. He is so powerful in this film, I don't think he would struggle doing that. Anyway, Darth Kylo finds this special holocron called a Wayfinder, which he uses to find the location of the Sith planet, Exegol. He goes by himself in his TIE fighter, alone, without a bodyguard. Why is the Supreme Leader of the First Order allowed to do this? Did no one say to him, "Hail, Supreme Leader Ren, you are our leader, our figurehead, our ruler. You are the most important leader of the First Order. For these reasons, might I humbly suggest that you connect the Wayfinder to the navigation systems of your flagship, so that when we find Palpatine, You can call upon the firepower of a Star Destroyer and all the battalions on board to do battle with the former Emperor and would-be challenger to your rule of the galaxy. Perhaps, Supreme Leader, we should bring the whole fleet just in case. I mean seriously, if Daft Kylo dies, it could throw the First Order into complete chaos. They would have to choose another leader, and this could lead to civil war within the First Order. Allow me, ladies and gentlemen, to remind everyone how in The Last Jedi, General Weasley started to have a panic attack when he discovered cloned Golem Palpatine was dead.
Who do you think you're talking to? You presume to command my army? Our Supreme Leader is dead! We have no ruler!
The one thing we can easily infer from this clip is that there was no obvious leader to replace cloned Golem Palpatine. Daft Kylo just assumed the role because he could. If there was an obvious second in command, the conversation would have been, we must contact X and tell him that he is the new Supreme Leader. So it is safe to assume that something similar would happen if Daft Kylo died. I'm pretty sure that very few First Order junior officers would want their senior officers gathering their forces for battle and trying to seize power, especially when the First Order is close to destroying the Resistance and seizing the galaxy. Moreover, why would Daft Kylo not want to bring his army and space fleet? It would be safe to assume that Emperor Do-It had a secret base, bodyguards, and maybe a small army. Wouldn't you want to bring your own army, just in case Emperor Do-It had protection? What makes Daft Kylo think he can defeat the Emperor anyway? I'm going to allow cloned Golem Palpatine to explain why Kylo isn't very powerful.
You were unbalanced, bested by a girl who had never held a lightsaber. You failed!
Seriously, this is stupid. Anyway, Daft Kylo arrives alone on Exegol and encounters Emperor Do-It. Do-It persuades Kylo to join him. We are then treated to a shot of the Final Order's fleet rising from the icy exterior of the planet. Several questions. First, why were they hiding under the ice in the first place? It isn't as if the planet is easy to find or reach, so why bother hiding the ships? The ships are already hidden by being on the planet. Second, why is Emperor Do-It building his forces on this planet? No, seriously, why? The planet is extremely hostile. It seems to be cold all year round, and lightning strikes are frequent. Can you imagine trying to build a base on a planet where a lightning strike happens every few seconds? It would be immensely dangerous, and it would mean that any structures and machines would need constant maintenance. I understand that Exegol is a secret planet, and so in that sense, it is a perfect place to build a fleet. But surely Do-It could find another secluded planet to build his forces where lightning strikes were rare? Perhaps in the unknown regions. Third, why did the ship stay in the planet's atmosphere? Wouldn't it take less fuel to enter the planet's orbit and just float around in space? Wouldn't it be safer as well? Aren't they likely to be struck by lightning in their current positions? If they moved into outer space, they would be safer as there'd be no possibility of lightning strikes. We will discuss their formation later, don't worry. As a finishing point, it is really convenient that Emperor Do-It has enough money and resources to create both the First Order and the Final Order. Could this convenient amount of credits and resources possessed by the Emperor be proof that Jar Jar Abrams is a lazy writer? No, that couldn't possibly be the case. Now let's leave this scene and go to the Resistance base. The Resistance base is on a jungle planet, which looks safe in secret. The Resistance seem to have replenished their supply of pilots and X-Wings. How did they do this? Well, some time seems to have passed since The Last Jedi, perhaps a year, so this isn't so bad. But the film never tells us how they recruited more men, or how they bought or built more X-Wings. Perhaps they bought them from those arms dealers on Canto Bight, who were selling to both sides. Maybe the new pilots are those child slaves on Canto Bight, but all grown up. Alright, the last line was a joke, but you get the idea. It would have been nice to have a throwaway line which would give the audience some clue as to how long it took to rebuild the Resistance. Because, at the end of The Last Jedi, the entirety of the Resistance managed to fit inside the Millennium Falcon. Now let's move on in the story. The Resistance know that Emperor Do-It is alive and hiding somewhere on Exegol because of a mole in the First Order. However, the Resistance do not know how to get to Exegol and determine that they need a wayfinder to reach the planet. So Rey and gang set off to find it and land on a desert planet, the name of which is unimportant, because, according to Jake Skywalker's journal, someone with a wayfinder was once there. Daft Kylo wants to capture Rey and he discovers that she is on this planet via Force Skype. He commands his Star Destroyer to fly to the planet, and orders that a company of stormtroopers on the planet go to the area. Now, a company numbers about 100 men, but the group of stormtroopers who chase our ragtag team of resistance fighters numbers 4 men. 4 men is the size of a section, sometimes referred to as a squad. Where are the other 96 men? We later see a few more stormtrooper sections on the planet, but we don't see numbers which would suggest that a company of stormtroopers was sent to the region. Let's talk about the chase scene for a few minutes. Rey and gang are on 2 hovering speeders, and this makes sense. Hovering speeders are common in Star Wars and have a number of advantages to tracked or wheeled speeders. But the stormtroopers are on speeders which have large tracks and do not hover. Why? Rey and gang's stolen speeders comfortably outpace the stormtrooper vehicles, so I am not sure what advantages these things are supposed to have. Presumably, the stormtrooper motorcycles were built for this in mind. Which is ridiculous, because the jetpacks would still work even without the benefit of a catapult. Also, it is a well-known engineering fact that the more moving parts and components you add to a machine, the more complicated it becomes, and the more complicated a machine becomes, the more likely the machine is to break down. So this tracked motorcycle has been given an unneeded function, which is only useful in these type of situations, which in turn will make it more likely to break down. What were the First Order engineers thinking? To top it off, there is this line.
Oh, they fly now!
They fly now! They fly now!
So Finn, the recently promoted janitor, and Poe the incompetent are rather surprised by the fact that the First Order now has stormtroopers equipped with jetpacks. Now, I have not checked the expanded universe materials concerning the First Order, so I do not know whether the First Order is supposed to have always had this type of stormtrooper. If this is a recent innovation, why didn't someone think of this sooner? The First Order has enough resources to build this, and this. So this is not a matter of credits, technology, or resources. This is a matter of vision. Considering that functional jetpacks would be useful in a variety of military scenarios, why would the First Order only think of using them now? If this isn't a recent innovation, and the First Order has always had special stormtroopers with jetpacks, why are Finn and Poe so surprised by their appearance? This is bizarre on all accounts. Nothing else happens on this planet which I want to discuss, so I shall summarise the other events, and we will skip ahead in the story. Long story short, they don't find the Wayfinder, but they find a dagger with written instructions, which will lead them to the Wayfinder. C-3PO refuses to translate the language on the blade, so Rey and gang fly to another planet to hack C-3PO, and Chewbacca is captured by the First Order. They also lose the dagger to the First Order, but it is fine because C-3PO has the inscription in his memory bank. While they are on this planet hacking C-3PO, Kylo's flagship shows up, with Chewbacca and the dagger on board. Let's talk about the scene wherein Rey and gang sneak on Daft Kylo's Star Destroyer. They use a First Order Captain's badge, which has boarding privileges, to fly on board inside an old rusty spaceship, which can still fly for some reason. The badge is introduced to us just a scene before. It's awfully convenient. Do these scenes exist in such close proximity because Jar Jar Abrams is a hack writer? No, that couldn't possibly be the reason. I don't know how Rey and gang use the badge to convince the docking officers to let this strange ship on board, which they have never seen before. Presumably, there is a code on the badge and they contacted the docking officers and provided the code. This scene mirrors the one in The Return of the Jedi, where the rebels sneak past the Imperial fleet and land on Endor in a stolen ship. In The Return of the Jedi, they provide a passcode and are allowed to land on Endor. Here's the problem with the scene in The Rise of Skywalker. Unlike the passcode in The Return of the Jedi, the badge, and the code which I imagine is on the badge, is affiliated with a specific individual, a captain. We are not told in the film whether this captain was killed and his badge taken, or whether his badge was stolen, and if he is still alive. If he is dead, then the First Order should have in their records that this specific captain is dead, and when the docking officers received the code, they should have been informed by their computer systems that this captain is dead. If the captain is not dead but lost his badge, then he would have reported the loss of his badge, and the computer systems would have informed the docking officers that the badge was no longer valid, or that it was lost in action. In either case, we would expect the docking officers to question and try to confirm the identity of the pilot of the ship before they let it board the Star Destroyer. That, after all, is the job of docking officers, to ensure that the ships which land on their ship are not hostile ones. In The Return of the Jedi, an Imperial communications officer asks Han Solo on the Imperial shuttle to describe his business, provide a passcode, and then to describe his cargo. After these 3 exchanges, the communications officer informs Han Solo that his shuttle is free to land on Endor. No exchanges of this kind take place in The Rise of Skywalker. We see Rey and gang's ship fly to the Star Destroyer, and then cut to the docking bay of that same Star Destroyer. This is why I am guessing that the badge had a code which they used to fool the docking officers that they were part of the First Order. I can only guess because the film does not show us. Anyway, these docking officers should have been alerted not only by the badge, but also by the fact that the ship approaching them is not a First Order ship. It may not be a Resistance ship, but it is not a First Order one. So surely, the officers on board the Star Destroyer would be suspicious and would want to confirm the identity of the crew before they let it on board. The First Order are clearly suspicious of the ship because 2 armed stormtroopers go to welcome Rey and gang off the ship, and they say something akin to, "Alright, let's check who is on board." They then get killed by Rey and gang. If the plan was to let the ship board for the sole purpose of capturing the crew, why would they send only a few stormtroopers? Check out the number of troops who were ready to take the crew of the Millennium Falcon prisoner in A New Hope. Those numbers are far superior to the ones we see in The Rise of Skywalker. Rey and gang kill the first 2 stormtroopers and then kill maybe 3 more in the docking area. So at most, a section was sent to capture them. Several platoons would have been a far better number for an attempted capture. Again, I would say look at Star Wars A New Hope. No matter how you cut it, the First Order are terribly incompetent in this part of the film. Now, let us skip a massive section of the film and just jump to the scene where the Resistance plan to attack the Final Order fleet on Exegol. The Resistance know the details of the Final Order ships and the layout of the base and many important details which we shall examine. They know all of this because they reactivated a little droid owned by a Sith assassin, who was given all these details. Why does this little droid have all these details? The droid appears to have been an assistant to a Sith, and doesn't appear to have been a worker on the base. In fact, I'm not even sure what this droid's function is. Could this droid's convenient knowledge and existence be due to lazy writing on the part of Jar Jar Abrams? No, that couldn't possibly be the reason. The Resistance know as well how to get to Exegol, because Rey has a wayfinder, and is travelling to the planet and has broadcast the directions and details to get there. Moreover, the Resistance know they have to strike now, because a planet was completely destroyed by just one of the Star Destroyers in the Final Order fleet. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Every single one of these Star Destroyers has the ability to destroy an entire planet. Emperor Dewitt ordered the destruction of the planet, and has broadcast a message stating that he has destroyed a planet and his fleet will be moving out to destroy anyone who does not surrender. For some reason, he has not moved his fleet into outer space, where they could fan out and move to other systems and begin a reconquista for the Empire. Instead, they are still floating in the skies of Exegol, presumably using gallons of fuel to remain floating. In fact, the fleet doesn't appear to have moved at all since the start of the film. Why didn't the Emperor keep the ships under the ice until they needed to move out? Surely that would conserve fuel supplies more effectively. We all know fuel is a valuable resource because of The Last Jedi. Why not take steps to conserve the amount used? But let's get to the plan. Princess Poppins is now dead, so Poe the Incompetent is now the general and leader of the Resistance, and he decides they need to attack the Final Order fleet before it leaves the atmosphere of Exegol. A sensible evaluation. However, he dismisses the key to an easy victory. One of his very intelligent and brave pilots, who in honour of his clear dedication to the Resistance cause and his sacrificial bravery, I shall name White Kamikaze, comes up with a brilliant suggestion. White Kamikaze, sitting down on a crate like a tactical mastermind, looks at the formation of the Final Order's fleet, and with a cool voice, and with the confidence of a Chad, turns to Poe the Virgin, and says something akin to, This calls for a Holdo maneuver. What White Kamikaze is referring to is that moment in The Last Jedi where Vice Admiral Holdo Pinky decided to lightspeed ram the Supremacy, destroying not only that super dreadnought, but also a dozen or so Star Destroyers which were close to it. White Kamikaze is suggesting the lightspeed ram to Poe because A. There are hundreds of Star Destroyers which need to be taken down, and the Resistance do not have any cruisers or capital ships which can fight toe-to-toe with them, which means that the most effective way to destroy these ships would be to use lightspeed rams similar to those seen in The Last Jedi. B. The formation of the Star Destroyers is super tight. The Star Destroyers are too close together for their own good. If one of these ships exploded, it would throw energy and shrapnel to the ship behind it, and the ships next to it. If one blows up, the others would be damaged. And as we can see in this scene from The Last Jedi, the lightspeeding shrapnel from the Supremacy actually destroys several other Star Destroyers. C. The Star Destroyers are arranged in neat, tidy rows. One X-Wing, ramming at lightspeed, would destroy a single row instantly, and the shrapnel from dozens of exploding Star Destroyers would destroy the rest of the Final Order fleet. By all accounts, White Kamikaze's tactical advice is on point, and he appears to be volunteering, and this is why I mentioned his sacrificial bravery and his dedication. But Finn responds with,
"Come on, that move is 1 in a million."
Poe, who is now the leader of the Resistance, agrees with Finn, and the idea is dropped and never discussed again. Neither Finn nor Poe give any reasons as to why the lightspeed ram won't work in this scenario. They just dismiss the idea of that tactic. Essentially, there is no reason why this cannot work. This leads me to conclude that the most incompetent and brain-dead commander in the whole of the Star Wars saga is none other than General Poe Dameron. Congratulations, Poe. You are now officially a more stupid and incompetent commander than Vice Admiral Holdo. Now, this scene is the result of Jar Jar Abrams using the character of Finn as a puppet for the delivery of this message. My fellow Star Wars fans and critics, I know that lightspeed rams are now canon, and I know that this would be a good time to use them. But it would make the final battle tensionless, so please just accept Finn's word that this tactic cannot be used. I know I haven't given you any reasons to believe it won't work, but please, just suspend your disbelief. Just pretend that this is another mystery box, and I will open it sometime in the future. This reeks of lazy writing. Could Jar Jar Abrams not come up with just one excuse for why it couldn't work? The excuse could be useless and rubbish, but an excuse would be nice. Now, before anyone starts to write a long and detailed comment explaining why a lightspeed ram wouldn't work in this scenario, I'm going to tell you to stop. Don't write your explanation under this video. I have a far better suggestion. Write a letter instead, and send it to the writing group of Lucasfilm. Give a detailed explanation for why this lightspeed ram would not work in the atmosphere of Exegol, and ask the production team at Lucasfilm to produce a director's cut of The Rise of Skywalker, and ask them to include your detailed and amazing explanation as to why the lightspeed ram tactic was impossible in this situation. Because I am going to tell you now, no matter how coherent your explanation is, no matter how detailed or how amazing, if it only exists in the comment section of this video, then I tell you truly, it will not be canon. I will tell you bluntly, if it does not appear in the film, your explanation will be nothing but fan fiction. Your explanation will be nothing but an excuse for the bad writing of J.J. Abrams and everyone else at Lucasfilm. Your explanation will be another example of Lucasfilm taking your love of Star Wars for granted and relying on you to defend their rubbish. Also, before anyone writes something about how X-Wings are not big enough to destroy Star Destroyers when they lightspeed ram, I would ask you to watch this video and then return to this essay. What's more, I do not want to hear anyone say, "Oh, this is explained in an official comic/book/podcast," because while such an explanation might well be canon, it is unacceptable for that explanation to be hidden within another work of fiction, which is not directly related to the work of fiction in question. If the last film had explained the rules of lightspeed ramming, that would be acceptable, because The Last Jedi is a work of fiction which is directly related to The Rise of Skywalker, because they are both part of the sequel trilogy. A book or comic, on the other hand, is not part of the sequel trilogy, and so its consumption should not be necessary for the comprehension of this film trilogy. Alright, let's get back to the battle plan. So, White Kamikaze is snubbed, and Poe the Incompetent, with Finn the recently promoted janitor, explain the plan. The plan itself is a hasty and improvised assault where a lot could go wrong very easily. However, considering the urgency of the situation, I cannot blame Poe the Incompetent and Finn the recently promoted janitor for the rushed nature of the plan, but the details of the plan reveal various incompetent errors made by Emperor DeWitt and his subordinates which must be discussed. Here is the Resistance plan. The Millennium Falcon and its pilot, Lando the Pansexual, will fly around the galaxy, broadcasting a message, calling anyone and everyone to come and fight the Final Order. Here I need to stop and criticise not Poe the Incompetent, not Finn the recently promoted janitor, but instead Princess Poppins. Why? Because Poe and Finn have been on a mission with Rey to find a Wayfinder, and haven't had the time nor the ability to concoct a plan to deal with the Final Order fleet. Princess Poppins, on the other hand, has had the time to gather her allies and prepare the fleet for war, and it appears she has done next to nothing in preparation. Why didn't she do what Lando is doing now? Send a ship around the galaxy, calling all forces to prepare for an attack on Exegol. The rest of the galaxy could use the time to prepare for such a dangerous assault. Why did Princess Poppins just sit around doing practically nothing? Alright, let's move on and continue with the plan. While Lando the Pansexual flies around the galaxy, calling people to battle, the forces of the Resistance will attack Exegol and destroy the fleet. The Resistance have two objectives. Objective 1. Stop the Final Order fleet from leaving Exegol. For some reason, the Final Order fleet needs to be guided out of the planet's atmosphere, because apparently the ship's pilots and crews
Can't tell which way's up out there.
Now that's very strange, because last time I checked, every single Star Destroyer variant in Star Wars had windows. Surely the crews have the intelligence to look out of the windows to tell which way is up or down. Is it really that foggy on Exegol? I have the suspicion that Jar Jar and the other writers wrote this line as a placeholder and intended to come back to it and give a better reason as to why the Star Destroyers needed to be guided out of the atmosphere, but then forgot to do so. Anyway, apparently then, it is difficult or impossible for the Star Destroyers to leave the planet without guidance from a special navigation device and system, because knowing which way is up is really hard. The Final Order fleet is going to be guided by a communications aerial which is on the surface of the planet. So in order to accomplish Objective 1, the Resistance plan to destroy the communications aerial. And this is where Finn, the recently promoted janitor, suggests that they pick up the Space Horse Riders on the plains of Endor. We shall discuss the Space Horse Riders later in this video essay, but let us concern ourselves with the Final Order. Why does the Final Order fleet have to be navigated out of Exegol's atmosphere using a special communications tower? Look, I get it. The planet's atmosphere is so hostile that people forget which way is up, and so special navigation equipment is necessary. But this raises the most obvious of questions. Why aren't all the Final Order Star Destroyers equipped with special navigation equipment so the crews know which way is up? I do not want to hear pointless excuses such as, oh, there wasn't enough time, or there wasn't enough money, or there wasn't enough resources to install navigation equipment in these ships, because all these reasons are excuses for the exceptionally lazy and useless writing of this train wreck posturing as a film. The Emperor has clearly been planning this for decades. He had enough time to create a clone called Snoke, turn Kylo Ren to the dark side, form the First Order to destroy the New Republic, and build this massive fleet under the ice of a planet. I think there would be enough time to get some special navigation systems installed in every last one of these ships. The Emperor also clearly has enough money and resources to create or otherwise buy the rather useful navigation systems for his Final Order fleet. He had enough resources to kickstart the First Order. The same First Order, which is able to build Star Destroyers bigger than Imperial ones, managed to build Star Killer Base, managed to build a Dreadnought, and the Supremacy. The Emperor, after starting the First Order, then had resources and money to spare for this Final Order fleet. But apparently we are supposed to believe that the Emperor ran out of money and was unable to foot the bill for navigation systems? Are the audience a joke to the writers? Is Star Wars a joke to the writers? Let's carry on and consider the next objective. Objective 2. Destroy the Final Order fleet. How is such a thing possible, you might be asking, ladies and gentlemen? Well, here's how. Although these look like normal Star Destroyers, as mentioned previously, they have cannons which can destroy entire planets. The big cannons in question are exceptionally vulnerable, and Poe tells the Resistance pilots and the audience that if a cannon is fired upon and destroyed, the entire ship will explode. To repeat, the destruction of a cannon will cause a chain reaction and cause the entire ship to explode. Emperor Do-It was alive at the time when both the first and second Death Stars were destroyed, and was likely informed of the destruction of Starkiller Base more recently. Did he not tell his ship engineers to design a cannon which would not take down the entire Star Destroyer if it was disabled or destroyed? Did no one, literally no one, look at the blueprints and say, "This is a massive chink in the armour, we better fix it quickly"? Because seriously, 2 Death Stars and 1 Starkiller Base later, and these engineers are still producing planet-destroying equipment with the same design faults. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you may have 2 questions. Your first might be, Your Imperial Majesty, how are the planet-killing cannons on the Star Destroyers powered? The first 2 Death Stars were massive in size, and likely had massive power reactors. Starkiller Base sucked the energy from a sun to power its weapon. What is powering these Star Destroyers? Well, ladies and gentlemen, the film never answers this question, but my best guess is the Star Destroyer's planet-killing cannons are powered by mystery boxes.
A mystery box.
Your second question might be, Your Imperial Majesty, it is all well and good for the Resistance that the Star Destroyers are so fragile, but how do Poe and his pilots plan on blubbing up these cannons? Sure, they might be weak, but surely the ships are protected by shields, which will defend them from any fighter wing blasts. Well, ladies and gentlemen, you would have hoped so. But as Poe and Finn explain, the Star Destroyers cannot have their shields up in Exegol's atmosphere. Why? The film never gives a good reason, so my guess as to why the Star Destroyers cannot have their shields up on Exegol is because Jar Jar Abrams is a lazy writer. Seriously, I cannot even joke about Abrams' writing anymore. This blasted film is filled with too many of these convenient coincidences and errors. Anyway, because Rey Palpatine has acted as the Resistance's wayfinder, they can now fly to the dreadful Sith planet. So the Millennium Falcon sets off to recruit more ships, and the Resistance pick up the Space Horses and then fly to Exegol. The Resistance catch the Final Order by surprise. The Final Order fleet opens fire with many batteries, and swarms of TIE fighters emerge from the ships. Yet somehow, the Resistance fleet is not destroyed or decimated immediately. It's all rather convenient. The Resistance fighters and transport shuttles fly towards the communications aerial, with the intention of landing the Space Horse riders and ground troops to destroy it and trap the Final Order fleet. I don't know why the plan wasn't just to fire torpedoes at the navigation tower. It doesn't look very tough. Just this once, I'll give the film the benefit of the doubt, and assume that the tower is made of such thick metal that the X-Wings cannot scratch it, and the ground forces are needed to storm it and shut it down from the inside. And yes, I am aware that this film doesn't deserve the benefit of the doubt. However, as they approach it, Admiral Pride Cometh Before the Fall orders that the communications aerial be shut down, and tells the communications officers on his bridge to activate their navigation systems so that the flagship can guide the rest of the Star Destroyers out of the atmosphere. So then, it is apparently possible for the Star Destroyers to be guided by another ship, and yet only the flagship has been given this navigation equipment. Why? Why couldn't all the ships have been given the useful ability to leave the planet alone and individually? For goodness sake, the Emperor and the entirety of the Final Order are commanded by idiots. And again, please don't tell me that they didn't have the time or the money, because it is quite clear that they had enough of both. The Resistance are able to tell that the communications tower has been shut down, and are also able to tell that the guiding signals are now coming from the Final Order flagship. So Poe cancels the ground assault, and the Resistance all head to the flagship to destroy the flagship's navigation systems. Let's consider this decision. If the Resistance successfully destroy the flagship's navigation tower, or the actual flagship for that matter, they will still have to destroy the communications aerial on the surface of the planet. Why? Because the second in command of the fleet would say something like this: "Oh dear, the flagship which was guiding us out of Exegol has been destroyed. Is the communications aerial still functioning? Okay, good. Turn it back on so we can enter outer space." I hope it is clear that the Resistance still need to destroy the communications tower, and the flagship, for the Final Order fleet to be trapped, and in so doing, Accomplish Objective 1. Trap the Final Order fleet in Exegol. This is very important, because if the Resistance fail to destroy the entire fleet, they can still trap the Final Order and give the rest of the galaxy, including Lando, the time to gather their forces and attempt another attack. There is no excuse for cancelling the ground assault. The Resistance have the forces necessary to attack both the flagship and the communications tower, and both need to be destroyed. Poe the Incompetent. Why are you so incompetent? And now, ladies and gentlemen, we are given a special treat. Think back to the briefing the Resistance pilots were given earlier in the film. One of the most important points mentioned was that the Final Order ships cannot put their shields up in Exegol's skies. Now, the flagship is an imposing Star Destroyer, but it has two weaknesses. The first is its planet-killing cannon. There are several shots in this film where a few X-Wing blasts and torpedoes destroy a Star Destroyer's big cannon and cause the entire thing to go boom. So the large planet-killing cannon is an obvious target. Another obvious target is the bridge of the Star Destroyer. In The Return of the Jedi, an out-of-control rebel fighter flew into the bridge of the Super Star Destroyer, the Executor, and destroyed it. The reason? The bridge's shields were gone, and the gunners were not able to shoot the fighter down in time to stop it. So the bridge is another obvious target on this Star Destroyer. So does Poe the Incompetent order an attack on the bridge or the cannon which would destroy the ship and its navigation tower? No. He orders that the ground troops land on top of the flagship and charge towards the onboard navigation tower with the objective of destroying it. This is where we see the Space Horse Riders in action. Where do I begin? First, as already established, attacking the bridge and/or the cannon with X-Wings would be a far quicker and far less costly way of taking down both the flagship and its navigation tower. Second, the flagship is high in the sky. The higher you go in the sky, the stronger the winds are, and the more difficult it is to breathe. And allow me to remind you, ladies and gentlemen, that Exegol has hostile weather, and there is a lightning strike every few seconds. So chances are it is very windy up there. This means that the Space Horses and ground troops would have difficulty keeping their footing, and would be blown off the flagship, or, at the least, their movement would be reduced to a small crawl, and they wouldn't be combat effective. Third, what is to stop Admiral Pride Cometh Before the Fall from ordering the ship to tilt 10 degrees or so, to make the Resistance forces fall and slip off his Star Destroyer? All he has to do is order his crew to grab onto something, and then tilt the ship. Why would Poe and Finn take a gamble and assume he wouldn't do such a thing? Fourth, as already established, attacking the bridge and/or the cannon with X-Wings would be a far quicker and far less costly way of taking down both the flagship and its navigation tower. Yes, I know I repeated a point here, but I'm going to keep repeating it because it is the most important of all these criticisms. Now, how does Pride Cometh Before the Fall respond to the situation? He orders his soldiers to climb on top of his ship and engage the Resistance troops in a gunfight. Considering his troops have special suits and equipment, perhaps, this is an alright counter. But I can suggest two better ones. Number 1, tilt the ship 10 degrees or so. This might injure some crew members on board the ship. However, the tilt of the ship combined with the rough winds and weather would practically guarantee the slipping and sliding of the Resistance ground forces off the Star Destroyer. Number 2, order a few TIE Fighter wings to sweep the deck of the Star Destroyer and shoot the boarding Resistance fighters. Now, I can hear an objection to this one. But your Imperial Majesty, the blasts from the TIE Fighters would damage the Star Destroyer if they did that. Indeed they would, but only superficially. The Star Destroyer's hull must have a massive amount of metal armour. The TIE Fighters' blasts would have no chance of seriously damaging the Star Destroyer, but they would be more than capable of killing the boarding Resistance fighters. Also, if the Star Destroyer is so weakly armoured that even fighter blasts can badly damage it, then I must ask, why wasn't Poe's plan to fly around with his X-Wings, shooting random parts of the ship to blow it up? Why did he decide landing Space Horse Riders was the optimal strategy? And once again, as already established, attacking the bridge and/or the cannon with X-Wings would be a far quicker and far less costly way of taking down both the flagship and its navigation tower. Moving on, the Resistance managed to fight back the Sith troopers and destroy the navigation tower on the flagship. Finn, the recently promoted janitor, and Space Horse Rider Girl decide they will stay behind and destroy the flagship. With BB-8's help, they manage to hack a turret on top of the flagship, turn it on the bridge, and open fire. This destroys the flagship. All well and good, but I have no idea how BB-8 managed to hack something so large. It's a mystery. A mystery box.
A mystery box.
Now, the rest of the X-Wings and Y-Wings, yes, ladies and gentlemen, there are Y-Wings in this film. Credit where credit is due. I did miss those fighters. Anyway, these X-Wings and Y-Wings fly around and start attacking the other Star Destroyers and blow a few up. However, the skies are now swarming with TIE fighters, who start picking off the Resistance fighters one by one. Poe the Incompetent realizes that this is the end of the Resistance, and everyone is about to die. Then Lando the Pansexual arrives in Exegol. He is accompanied by thousands of random fighter craft, ready to do battle with the Final Order fleet. This raises questions. Where were all these fighters and starships at the Battle of Crait? Why did they not come to the Resistance's aid at Crait, and why are they coming only now? Were they all persuaded by Lando's charisma? Or is this yet another mystery box?
A mystery box.
How did they mobilize so quickly? Am I supposed to believe hundreds of starships and fighters were just hanging around in space doing nothing, and then heard Lando's message and said to themselves, "Cancel the pub crawl, it's time for war"? Are we supposed to believe that hundreds of ships were prepared for battle and waiting patiently for a call to arms? This can sometimes be forgotten, but it does take time for people to respond to such things. Now, I can hear a suggestion here. What if, Your Imperial Majesty, all these pilots, after hearing Palpatine's initial message to the galaxy that he was alive, decided to prepare for battle because they hated the Empire and wanted to fight? In other words, could it be possible that these ships had been preparing for some time and were waiting around for some information relating to the former Emperor's location? If this is supposed to be the case, and to be fair, I think it would have to be the case, then why did the Resistance not see a boost in its recruitment levels? There isn't even a throwaway line from Leia or any other Resistance member about their numbers increasing because of Emperor DeWitt's galaxy-wide announcement. The Resistance presumably have more bases than the one we see on the Jungle Planet at the beginning of the film, so surely anyone wanting to fight the Final Order would be trying to join the Resistance, or trying to contact them to say they would fight with them. The existence of this massive fleet is possible, but it's also highly implausible. For some strange reason, although the newly arrived fleet consists of tightly packed ships, the Star Destroyers don't open fire on them with either their guns or their planet-killing cannons. Why not? Hitting these tightly packed ships would be very effective, as any exploding ship would damage its immediate neighbours. It would be an effective way to inflict painful losses on the reinforcements and an economic use of ammunition. Also, why is Lando's fleet so tightly packed together anyway? Surely all the pilots understand why flying in such a tight formation is so dangerous. Anyhow, the arrival of these starships led by Lando the Pansexual turns the tide, and the Final Order fleet is destroyed in a rather boring battle scene. Alright, time to wrap up a few small things and go forwards into a conclusion. Emperor DeWitt has thousands of cloaked figures under the surface of Exegol who stand there and chant. I don't care if they are Sith or Stormtroopers. They shouldn't be there. They should be preparing to conquer the galaxy. That is a lot of fighting men who could be doing something useful. They aren't needed with the Emperor, and they die rather quickly anyway. After the final battle, an officer reports to Poe the Incompetent that the whole galaxy is revolting against the First Order. We then see a shot of a destroyed and burning First Order Star Destroyer in space. So apparently everyone hates the First Order, but only now are they taking action. Why didn't they help at the Battle of Crait, for goodness sake? My military analysis of this film is complete. The Rise of Skywalker is terrible and bad. But is it worse than The Last Jedi? Do you know what? I'm actually going to say that it is, and I shall tell you why. Watching The Last Jedi was frustrating and bewildering. The problem with the military incompetence in The Last Jedi was that it made all the characters look so foolish and stupid that I ended up disliking them intensely. Almost every other action scene, I was thinking to myself, these commanders are brain dead. But interestingly, I didn't find myself watching the action scenes and thinking to myself, this is awfully convenient. But in The Rise of Skywalker, I not only found myself shaking my head at the stupidity of the commanders, but also at the convenient writing, which was so prevalent in this film. Not only did I find the military incompetence frustrating, I found the conveniences which accompanied said incompetence irritating as well. such as the Final Order's Star Destroyers not being able to deploy shields in Exegol's atmosphere, and being so weak that a couple of shots at their main cannons caused them to explode. I'm not sure if I can even express in words how frustrating it is to sit back and actually think about the action scenes in this film. It is maddeningly awful. I dislike the utter laziness and whatever attitude on display in this film. The Last Jedi was many things, but I don't think it would be fair to describe it as the product of laziness. The Rise of Skywalker is many things, and lazy is one of them. Because of this, I hate the action scenes in The Rise of Skywalker even more than I hate the action scenes in The Last Jedi. And now, if I am honest, I don't really have much more to say. I am just glad that the sequel trilogy is finally over. I want to thank you all for watching this video, and for following this channel over the past 2 years. When I made my military analysis video of The Last Jedi back in 2018, I did not expect anyone to actually watch it. I was over the moon when I saw that I had over 100 subscribers and 5,000 views within just a few days of uploading the video. Fair to say, those numbers ballooned extraordinarily quickly. I would like to thank everyone for that, and for the position I am now in. I will say now that, for me, Star Wars is dead, and I'm not going to bother watching any new Star Wars content. I may make some more videos on the sequel trilogy, and on Star Wars in general, and it is likely I will reference the mistakes of this new trilogy in other essays. However, this video marks my farewell to the saga. Any future videos I make about the sequel trilogy will be the video essay equivalent of a long footnote. I am now done with Disney Star Wars. I'd like to thank you ladies and gentlemen for watching, and I hope you all have an excellent day. Before I finish this video for good, I have one last thing to say. It would be easy to blame J.J. Abrams for the utter state of this film, and I have aimed a good amount of criticism at him. But if the recent leaks about studio involvement in the production of The Rise of Skywalker are true, then a lot of blame must fall on Lucasfilm as well. For instance, the leaks claim that the "they fly now" scene was put in the film by the studio executives. I'm actually inclined to believe these recent leaks for the simple reason that I can imagine people like Kathleen Kennedy and Bob Iger meddling with this film. I also hope that the Abrams cut is leaked at some stage, assuming that it does exist. What I find especially interesting is, if the leaks are true, Abrams also had his hands tied by the studio when he was making The Force Awakens, and was forced to include the addition of Starkiller Base because of the executives in Lucasfilm. This makes me wonder whether Rian Johnson really had much control over the direction of The Last Jedi. Unfortunately, it will probably be some years before we get complete answers to these questions.